All right. Lesson 3, Unit 4, representation addition of tenths and hundredths. In the last lesson, you added tenths to tenths and hundredths to hundredths, but now you're going to be adding them to each other. So the question we're going to think about is, how can you determine the sum of 7 tenths and 68 hundredths? So just like fractions that have a different denominator, these decimals are different sizes. So I cannot just add them together and say, oh, 7 plus 68 is 75, and then we'll just say 75. Because it's like, well, look how big the hundredths or the tenths are versus the hundredths are so much smaller. We have to take their size into account. So we can use decimal grids. I know the I can explain how to use various strategies. So we are going to think about some different things, but in this one, it's mainly going to be the decimal grids again, just to visualize them. So we saw the picture of 7 tenths and 68 hundredths. You can fill it in on your chart as you watch the video or fill it in now. But what I want you to think about is, how can we show 7 tenths on the hundredths grid? Because I can't just color in 7 of the little pieces. So what would I do? All right, here's the 7 tenths. There's a 68 hundredths. Oh, I fill in 7 whole rows. Kind of like we did in the last one, as I was saying, like, remember 10 of something is just 1/10. So on your line, you can think about, before you solve, convert tenths into hundredths. So remember, 7 tenths is the same as 70 hundredths. So then they're the same size as my 68 hundredths, so then I can add them together. So we're converting the tenths into hundredths. We're thinking of them as the same size pieces. They're like 7 rows, but that's 70 hundredths. So then to show the sum, we can see how they do that. Again, fill in your chart as you watch. Even if it feels like, no, I don't need to, it's still good to sort of make that connection in our brain. Once we have the 7 tenths, then we can fill in 6 more rows and then 8. So then we can get our total and we can see, oh, I have 1 whole and then I have 38 more hundredths. So shade 68 more squares. Then, like I said, it is 1 and 38 hundredths. So I have 1 whole, 3 more rows, 8 little pieces. That's 38 hundredths is the size of the pieces. So we're using decimal grids to help us determine sums. Sometimes we need to convert tenths, that should say, to hundredths, to use a decimal grid. So that is a strategy. So if we think about using a strategy to help us solve addition, sometimes we need to take those tenths and convert them into hundredths to solve them. The example they gave was 7 tenths is the same as 70 hundredths. All right, so we'll do some practice. You have some grids on your paper, so make sure you are using those as we go through it. All right, 9 tenths plus 2 hundredths. Ooh, they really just want me to fill in a lot of little boxes, don't they? So let me see if I can find one that's a little less, because otherwise you're going to have to sit and watch me do this forever. All right, 14 tenths plus 5, or 14 hundredths, excuse me, plus 5 tenths. Go ahead and choose. All right, I'm going to do the 5 tenths first. You can add them in either order, and it's going to be easier to fill in those 5 rows first. Because remember, 5 tenths is how many hundredths? 50. Remember, if I think about 5 tenths, that's the same as 50 hundredths. So I'm not going to count everyone, though, just because I know each row is 10. So I'm going to say there's 40 and there's 50. If you want to color them in the other direction, you can also do that as well. I'd recommend not making a pattern with these like we do on the morning, because it's just going to make it harder to count at the end. All right, and then we have 14 hundredths. So we're going to fill in another row, and then 4 more. So then I can visually see, oh, how many rows do I have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rows. So that's 60. Plus 1, 2, 3, 4. So I have 64 hundredths. And you might be thinking, I didn't even need to do that on my paper. But it's still good practice to visualize what it actually looks like. Mental math is great, but visualizing is also important. All right, we'll just do maybe 1 or 2 more. So 45 hundredths plus 4 tenths, go ahead and add it up. All right, eventually when we get to the strategy of just writing it down, we're going to make the connection of what we're doing here. So I'm going to again start with my 4 tenths. And how many hundredths is 4 tenths? 40 hundredths. There's 30. All right, there's 40. Now I'm going to do my 45. You just get to watch me fill in boxes. Well, you can fill in your boxes while I'm filling in mine, if you didn't already do that. Hopefully you did to help you solve it, but if you didn't, you can do it now to at least have something to refer back to as you're doing your practice. That's part of why we take notes, is so I have something to look back at. Partially just so that I can, like, writing it down helps get it in my brain, but also, oh, what did I do? I did something weird. I only filled in 3 of the blue rows instead of 4. I would have gotten the wrong answer because I wasn't being careful. Hopefully you noticed that before I did. There we go. 40 or 4 tenths, then 45 hundredths. So I can say, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 full rows, which is 80. 5 more, 85 hundredths. 85. All right. I know, I have a different strategy. I'm going to use it. It'll help me out. I'm actually going to go up to this first one because I want to, well, anyway. Go ahead and figure out 9 tenths plus 2 hundredths. All right, hopefully you got it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 tenths. And remember, 9 tenths is the same as 90 hundredths. And then just 2 more hundredths. So how many do I get? 92 hundredths. Wasn't that easier? Love how I think of things partway through. Sometimes that's what happens. You don't think of the quick way right away. And you do it the slow way until you think of it. All right. I know you have an extra box or multiple extra boxes. That's okay. Just go ahead and do your practice. Let me know if you need help. I'm going to check and see. Ooh, okay. Actually, so if I had 86 hundredths plus 5 tenths, think of like 86 little hundredths, 5 tenths more. I'm going to have to use my second box. So if you did your box for this one, go ahead, fill it in and figure it out. Bonus, sorry. Hopefully you figured out that, oh, the 8 and the 5, that's 13 tenths plus 6 more hundredths. Should be 1 and 36 hundredths. Yeah, so sometimes you will need that extra box if you have enough hundredths and then tenths. Again, it'll carry over and make a whole, so then you need another one. All right, good luck. Let me know if you need help.